Bring up the subject of a nonprofit's bylaws, and you are sure to get an interesting response. For many nonprofits, their bylaws are just some forgotten document full of legalese, gathering dust in a file cabinet somewhere. No one on the current board of directors, they don't know who prepared them, nor what any of the provisions actually mean, and they certainly are not referring back to them for any reason regarding governance. Now, at the other end of the spectrum are nonprofits that take their bylaws very seriously and make sure their governing activities, well, that they comply with those requirements, maybe even to an extreme. Wherever your nonprofit lands on this spectrum, it's important to know what your bylaws are for, what they say, and how to best leverage them for your organization's benefit. I'm Greg McRae, founder and CEO of Foundation Group, and welcome to our 501c3 University channel. First, a definition. What are bylaws? Well, a nonprofit's bylaws, they're a legal document that dictates how the organization must be governed. Failure by a board to follow the stipulations outlined in the bylaws, well, it can have devastating consequences to the organization and even potentially to the board members themselves. Since bylaws are such a big deal, it stands to reason that what they contain and how they are used should be taken extremely seriously. So with that in mind, let's take a look at 8 do's and don'ts for your nonprofit's bylaws. The first do is get assistance in drafting your bylaws from an expert experienced in nonprofit matters. Now, this could be an attorney or a professional services firm like Foundation Group, but 2 words of caution here. 1, don't assume your attorney understands nonprofit issues. We've fixed countless attorney-prepared bylaws from attorneys that didn't understand nonprofit rules. And 2, bylaws are a legal document, so using a non-attorney professional means essentially that you're getting self-help assistance. And don't forget that it's still the board's responsibility to have input into the provisions, understand what they mean, and vote to adopt the final product. The second do is stick to the basics. Your bylaws are a lot like the U.S. Constitution, and for a mini civics lesson, the Constitution covers the highest level concepts of governance, the 30,000-foot view. The details and minutiae are left to the law. Now, like the Constitution, your bylaws should only deal with the highest level of governing issues such as organizational purpose, board structure, officer positions, descriptions and responsibilities, terms of board service, officer board member succession and removal, official meeting requirements, membership provisions, voting rights, conflict of interest policies, and any other non-negotiables that your governing body deems necessary. Now, one critical element often erroneously omitted is the provision for amending the bylaws in the future. Don't forget that. Which brings us to our first don't. Don't treat your bylaws as a policy and procedures manual. I have seen countless bylaws contain everything from employee vacation rules to the organization's anti-smoking policy. These are totally inappropriate for nonprofit bylaws. Create a separate policy and procedure manual for membership purposes. Remember the U.S. Constitution. Congress passes hundreds of laws each year, and none are added to the Constitution. The Constitution dictates whether a proposed law is allowable or constitutional, but the Constitution rarely gets changed. It should be the same way for your bylaws. Coming back to our do list, the next do is know what's in your bylaws. As a board member, you have a fiduciary responsibility to understand what each and every provision means. If there's provisions you don't understand, ask another board member or seek the advice of a professional. Our next do is follow the provisions religiously. You not only have a duty to understand your bylaws, you're also legally accountable to follow them. Now, this isn't optional. A court of law will side with your bylaws in any dispute brought by another board member, an employee, volunteer, donor, or maybe even a recipient of services with whom you've got a grievance. Time for another don't. Don't include provisions that tie the hands of future boards. I used to serve on an HOA board that had absurd provisions in its bylaws, and it negatively affected all homeowners. Now, maybe they made sense 30 years ago when they were drafted, but they didn't anymore. But the bylaws contained a provision that required 2/3 approval of every eligible member in order to make an amendment. Well, that amounted to a yes vote from 134 out of 200 homeowners in the neighborhood. We couldn't even get close to 2/3 of the homeowners to even show up to vote, much less get a supermajority approval for the changes. Think long and hard about the downstream consequences to all provisions you put in your bylaws. Our last don't is don't fail to review your bylaws regularly. At least annually, all board members should refamiliarize themselves with the provisions. This will go a long way toward preventing costly mistakes. New board members should be provided with a copy immediately upon joining the board. Our final do is do keep your bylaws relevant. Look, times and circumstances change, and your most important governing document, it should reflect those changes. If your bylaws need amending to reflect current realities, do it. Just make sure the changes make long-term sense and that they are compliant with nonprofit law and that your board follows the procedures outlined in your bylaws for making any amendments. Proper use of an organization's bylaws, that not only provides the necessary structure to effective governance, it eliminates the willy-nilly guesswork so common in ineffective nonprofits. Good governance establishes a foundation for good work. So know your bylaws and govern well. Well, that's it for today. If you liked this video, be sure and click the like button. It really does help us out. Plus, click the subscribe button and the little bell icon to be notified of new content when we post it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.